Let's talk about the drought. Joel Fitzgibbon had an interesting idea today, which is that essentially, when it comes to drought policy, we should have something like a war cabinet. Now, this happens, of course, at times of great and grave conflict, where you take the best of the government and the best of the opposition and you try to form a united policy that means, regardless of whom the government is, there is a united, consistent policy when it comes to drought. This is what he said today.
I appeal to Scott Morrison to stop being loose with the truth, to put the spin aside, to come to us on a bipartisan. Let's have a war cabinet. Yeah. Let's have Anthony Albanese, Scott Morrison, the key people sitting around the same table, taking the politics right out and saying, what are we going to do about this national emergency?
New glasses, new suit, new tie. He's not at all running to be leader when Albo inevitably falls over. Not at all. Now, Darren Chester, who is, of course, part of the federal government, well, he speaks openly about just how drought is the main focus of most conversations around the cabinet table.
The cabinet of the day, the government elected to represent Australians in this place, is making decisions every day on this issue. And if you look at the electoral map, of Australia and look at where the drought-affected areas are, they're all in National Party or Liberal Party seats because we tend to represent the vast areas of regional Australia. So when you look at the drought-impacted parts of Australia, it's my local members, my colleagues who are out there every day talking to farmers in their community, talking to small business owners, talking to the doctors and the support services that are available in those communities and making sure we're responding to the drought appropriately in all those communities.
Robbie, you live in regional Queensland. Is it time to throw more politicians at the problem or just let a government govern?
I do think there's merit in what they're saying in trying to make it bipartisan or, you know, get buy-in by both sides because it, you know, it seems to be that it gets, you know, people try and take political advantage by just tearing down whatever the other side's doing. I chaired the Rural Drought Task Force here in Queensland and the one initiative I think is the best in those terms is finance. You know, governments can't access cheap molasses or cheap feed or cheap diesel. Governments can access cheap money. And throughout Australia's history, we've always had a history of having an agricultural bank or a reconstruction board of some natures that, you know, a lot of those farmers that are good farmers, and you can't save everyone, but there's some good people out there that just need some help. And often one of the biggest line items on their profit and loss is the interest they pay on their loans. And a government gets access to cheap money, and there's people out there at the moment paying 8%, or you know, many paying over 5%. They'd be paying a lot less and saving money, and helping them get through this period. That's one way they could be helping. But I think both sides indulge in, you know, their economic rationalists that can't abide that you turn to any option like that. Even though I've had conversations with bankers before that believe it's a good idea. So that's something that needs to be done there that's not discussed and is not being put on the table, that both sides are avoiding. But definitely it helps to have both sides buying in on this and have some longevity around some good policy. But I really don't cop a lot of those people saying, you know, it's time for some of these people to get off, because most people don't appreciate in this debate that the social fabric and you know, trying to get workforce or good people out there working in some of those remote areas, that's not as fluid as people expect, like in other markets, and you need to preserve that where you can, and that's needed now more than ever.
Fiona, it feels like Joel Fitzgibbon, look, it is a reasonable idea at times of crisis, but there would be arguments that, well, hang on, should there be a war cabinet for mental health issues? Should there be a war cabinet for domestic violence? Should there be a war cabinet for all of those things? Obviously, drought is multifaceted, requires a whole collection of things from government, but also, if you are going to branch it out from just the government, I don't want it to be just Team Red and Team Blue. I want Katter's Australia Party there. I want Pauline Hanson's party there. I want other voices there. The Greens can go jump, but what do you think?
Yeah, well, Paul, there is already a committee system that exists within federal parliament whereby a lot of those sorts of voices right across the parliament are already represented and already have their say in various capacities, which means there is a role for the government of the day to just get on and do their job. And that's exactly what Scott Morrison's saying. And, you know, as far as a major party that really is focused on representing the rights and the issues that are in regional Australia, well, that is the whole mandate of what the National Party is, and Darren Chester is 100% right about that. Now, if we are going to have a war cabinet, I actually don't think the war cabinet is something between Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese, but rather I think it needs to be between Scott Morrison and Gladys Berejiklian and Anastasia Palaszczuk and the councils that are involved in these areas. It needs to be almost more like what the city deals are, where you look across the councils, the state government, the federal government, because at all tiers, they actually represent and deliver different types of services. I mean, overwhelmingly, the states will deliver food and fodder to the livestock and the animals. The federal government will look at the home packages, the farm packages that will go to people living on the land, and then you'll have councils delivering different services again. You've got to look at how the water is going to get to these different places. You've got to look at the long-term planning. You've got to look at the infrastructure. Throwing all of these other pieces into that mix, I'm not sure that's quite the right thing here. What we need is to actually get all tiers of government on the same page, not all political parties.